thank you for the lovely introduction. I really appreciate that. It's really lovely. I want to say again what an incredible privilege it is to be here. Has anybody here heard of IMAGO? Yes? No? So who's in a relationship here? Okay, and who's not? Okay, do you want to meet? Do you know each other? Well, IMAGO is how we get unfucked, okay? So by the time you leave tonight, if you haven't fucked up enough, you'll learn how to fuck up more, but you'll also learn how to unfuck. So that's balance, yeah? Who's interested? Okay. Let me tell you that IMAGO is great for both singles and couples, heterosexual couples and non-heterosexual couples, so it fits for everybody. Who am I? Well, Amber's told you a little bit, but I'll tell you a bit more. I was born in Russia and I lived in France and grew up there. Spent a little time in Italy, hence my name Francesca. I've had many names, sometimes I don't know who I am. You know, so Fran fits them all. I've been Francesca, Francine, Fanny, I don't like that. So Fran is fine. My darling husband, who I love and adore even after all this time, he calls me Cheska. So that's really special. Yeah? Do you have pet names? That's a lovely thing to do. Yeah? So we've been married 43 years. She's hot. We've been married 43 years and most of those have been absolutely wonderful. Most of them. So, but I want you to know that despite having worked in this field for over 30 years, I'm also a fellow traveller. And what that means is I'm still learning, still studying, and even I sometimes fuck up, screw up. Anybody not understand that terminology? So we're going to tell you a little bit about how we fuck up and how we resolve that. Are you interested in that? Yeah? Okay. And also what works and what doesn't. So you'll hopefully come away with some great tips. Who is Stan? Well, apart from being a magnificent person who dresses divinely and dances a storm, like he's incredible. Am I allowed to say how old you are? He's 75. Now, that's hard to believe. You know, he's the most sexy dancer around. My dream man, and he happens to be it, had some non-negotiables. One was he had to be a fantastic cook, and guess what? He is. A fabulous dancer, and he is. The best fuck in the country, and he is. Don't ask me how I know. He's just fantastic, and I don't say that lightly. He's the best partner, lover, friend I could ever have dreamed of. So what we're going to teach you is how relationships occur. How do you choose the person that you've chosen? And you may think you know, but we've got a few little things that may shock you. And then how does the dream turn into a scream? How does it become a nightmare? Yeah? I can see some people nodding. Right. Well, you're going to find out. Because Plato, you all heard of Plato? He's a very famous philosopher. 2,000 years ago he said, love is a grave mental disease. Well, with over 50% of marriages ending in divorce, and more than 70% of second marriages fail, did you know that? So how far have we come? Not very far at all. You know, when we're in love, anybody here never been in love? I mean, how great does it feel? You know, you feel like you jump to the moon, the world is in Technicolor, yeah? Can you relate to that? You have energy to burn, you love everybody. But when we fall out of love, we have the exact opposite. The sky is grey, it's empty. Some people go to suicide or murder or food addictions or drug addictions. It's horrible. So there's an everlasting, universal desire, search for love. And we hope, if you haven't found it, that you will. And there are certain tricks ideas that will tell you again about attraction, which will help you. So the first thing we want to look at is first of all, I'll tell you how I met Stan. Would you believe it was on a blind date? I've never ever been on a blind date. This was my first and last blind date ever. I got engaged at the age of 18, which is utterly and totally ridiculous. And that was to my best boyfriend at the time. He was like my best girl buddy, boy buddy, you know. And we decided, not we decided, actually my father decided it was time for me to get engaged. I was a good girl in those days, so I did what I was told. I got engaged, and 3 months later I broke it off. I just couldn't make the shift, you know. I'm not going to go to bed with this guy. I'm kidding, it just didn't turn me on. I loved him madly, but not in that way. So we broke it off, and in those days that was like, oh, horror. How can you do such a thing, you know? I was the pariah of Melbourne. Anyway, I got over that, and some months later a friend of mine said, you've got to meet this guy Stan. And I said, Stan? I know everybody. Who's Stan? I'm Jewish. It's not such a big community, you know. And being a good girl, I wouldn't go out with anyone who was not Jewish. Well, only secretly. So this guy said, listen, I'll set it up for you. You can meet him. I thought, God, he'll think I'm really desperate, you know. I've never, ever gone on a blind date. And then I thought, well, maybe he's desperate, you know. Why is he going on a blind date? Anyway, the night came. The night came. and I was too scared to come out of the bathroom. My little brother was home, and I said to him, so what's he like? What's he like? And he said, he's gorgeous. And I thought, yeah, right. I bet he's fat. I bet he's got pimples all over his face, you know. That'd be the sort of thing my brother would do, you know, just to get back at me for all the mean things I've ever done to him, like about 3 or maybe 5. Anyway, so finally I came out, and he was gorgeous. In fact, he still is. Yeah? I looked at him, and I swear to you, my heart just went, oh, boom, 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 and it still does, you know? After all this time, when he comes towards me, and I'm not having a heart attack, my heart goes like that, and my knees go weak. And I hope that you have that, and if not, that you will, because it's fantastic. And there are ways to have that happen too, by the way. So I'll tell you some of those. What?
Without drugs.
Without drugs, yes. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is what attracts us. Are you interested in that? How do you meet your partner or partners? How do you go from love to conflict? And how do you go from conflict back to love? Yeah? Interesting. And ultimately, how do you have the relationship that you dream of? You know, this is possible if only you know how. And IMAGO has some wonderful principles. It really, really does. It makes a lot of sense. As I go through some of the principles, and forgive me because some of it will be a little bit like a lecture, but it's just too good to not do it properly. Some of the principles you'll say, I know that. Well, that's great. That's what I love about it. It makes sense. Yeah? And when something makes sense, it hits home. It rings true. This stuff really works. Okay. So, one story will illustrate what I mean. Some time ago, I went to the fridge, opened the fridge. I was hungry. Now, I may not look it, but I actually eat a lot. I'm regularly hungry. Food and sex kind of, and footy, you know, it's just my thing. I love it. Anyway, I opened the fridge and I freaked out. In my world, there's no food in there. And by freak out, I mean freak out. I cried, I yelled, and I laid into Stan, not physically, just verbally. How can you do this to me? This is just horrific. This is the man that I'm madly in love with. So what's come over me? What's that about? Can any of you relate to freaking out? Yeah? Okay. So one of the things we're going to teach you tonight is that if anything is historical, like that, hysterical, it's historical. What does that mean? It's some transportation from the past out of the unconscious mind that gets triggered and comes back and takes over. Okay? Most of the problems between couples are not about them. Now remember that, if you don't already know that. Most of the problems between couples are not about them. There's stuff that's in the back of the mind that gets set forth, that gets replayed. Now that may sound like a disaster, but guess what? It's the seeds for growth. One of the beautiful things about IMAGO is it's really, really positive, and I love that about it. So you'll find out that we need some conflict in order to grow. Why IMAGO? After 30 years of study, and I'm still studying, I've just got my last qualification as an international workshop presenter. I'll never stop studying. Yeah? I've discovered that IMAGO works better than any therapy I've ever done. Now, I'm a pragmatist. Pragmatist? Stan helps me with my English. It's not my primary language. You know, if something works, it makes sense to use it. And the beauty about IMAGO is that it does work. Is that good news? Yeah. Not only does it work, it's positive, it's speedy, it's efficient. Hey, why wouldn't you use that? Yeah? You don't have to listen to people's problems all the time. Because there's some research around now that, 10 years of therapy of going over and over what went wrong in childhood actually can make it worse. Have you any of you heard that? Yeah? So the only time, and Stan and I often do work together, I also have my individual practice, but we only delve into the past if it interferes in the present. And it does. But there are ways to delve into the past that are really creative and interesting, and guess what? They work. Yeah? So we're going to actually demonstrate one of those to you tonight. And we're going to use that example of the fridge episode, that famous episode, which taught me so much about myself. Yeah? So it was a blessing in disguise. Just going to run you through some of the basic ideas of IMAGO so that you know the background that I'm coming from. Now, the first one is that your unconscious mind chooses your partner. Now this may seem rather radical, and when I explain to you exactly what the word IMAGO means, that will make sense to you. So we think we know what we're choosing, but actually we're choosing a lot more than we know. And also that our childhood influences the type of partner that we choose, or partners, and the quality of relationships that we're going to have. As Amber mentioned, we do get wounded in childhood. That doesn't mean we've been bashed up or anything like that. It means none of us had a perfect childhood, and that creates wounds. And a wound can just be because your mum was busy or your dad was busy, it doesn't have to be anything tragic or horrible. Now here's a fascinating one. The purpose of a committed relationship is to complete childhood. That is almost my favourite one. Most of us think when we get into trouble that we've got to run, that this is the wrong person. But we're going to teach you that most of the time is in fact the right person. Conflict is growth trying to happen. You'll hear me say that a few times. Okay? So we need an incompatible partner to recover and grow. Does this sound like insanity? Yeah? So you may now be thinking, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't have run away from him or her. Okay, and we need to move from an unconscious to a conscious relationship. So the unconscious part is all that old stuff that comes back and floods us. And we think it's about the other person, whereas often it's not. They're just a gift of a trigger to bring back things that we have to resolve. Here's a very unpopular one. Both positive and negative aspects in a relationship are co-created. What does that mean? It means it's nobody's fault, okay? One of the key things we teach in IMAGO is you can be right or you can be in a relationship. And just digest that one. That's pretty profound. Okay, now the recovery and restoration of wholeness and full aliveness occurs only in a committed relationship. And I'll explain more about that. But essentially it's that we need someone to set off our stuff. Yeah? If we're on our own, yeah, that's nice, but nothing comes up. So it's not to say that single people aren't worthwhile or anything like that. I don't mean that. But deeper issues will come up in a committed relationship. And I've already said to you that conflict is growth trying to happen. And the practice of IMAGO comes out of these underlying points. So what attracted me to Stan? Well, when I first saw him, He was tall. Still is tall.
Shrinking.
Dark. Well, he's not so dark. Handsome. He's still handsome. And he had incredible manners and still does. And he looked at me in a certain way that made me still does. Yeah. He was and is very intelligent. He speaks beautifully. He's exceptionally organised. Those there were the conscious things. Have a moment and think about what attracted you to a partner or particular partners. Yeah? Any of those resonate? Okay, that's what you know. But here's the interesting part. There's a lot that's unconscious. So what was unconscious for me, and it became conscious later, was this man cooks. Ha, that was my conscious excitement. But the unconscious thing was, he's going to feed me. This is new mummy. He's going to look after me. He will never, ever abandon me. Okay? Now, I didn't know that until that fridge episode. I went to therapy and discovered that I nearly died of starvation as an infant. Okay? I didn't know that until he set this back up for me. Yeah? Can you relate to anything like that? Yeah? So there's two levels. Conscious, unconscious. And the unconscious ones actually are stronger. The conscious ones typically don't last. Have you noticed that? Yeah, they kind of fade a little. But the unconscious ones is what drives us. Okay. So what is the IMAGO? Slide, please. What does the word actually mean? IMAGO is a Latin word, and it's a Latin word that means image. Okay. And what it is, the slide will come up eventually. It's an image like a template that's unconscious that has the primary qualities of our parents and caretakers. And the primary qualities are positive and negative. Okay? So, that's okay, I'll make it up. So Stan's intelligence, to me, reminded me of my father's intelligence. What also attracted me, and this might sound weird, but what also attracted me was that he used his intelligence to control me, which is what my father did. Now you might think, this woman's wacky, why would that attract her? Well, remember, the unconscious purpose of a relationship is to grow up. And unless something is set off in me, I can't heal it. Does that make sense? Yeah? What attracted me initially to Stan ultimately pissed me off, you know? How dare you control me? You're just like my dad, yeah? Whereas initially I was really quite chaotic. I'm still quite chaotic, but with a bit of organisation in me now. So we form this IMAGO during childhood, and we're constantly looking for someone to give us back the positives, and we need the negatives in order to heal them. Does that make sense? Yeah? So that's the basis of attraction. We are looking for someone who will complete our wounds by bringing them up, but then to heal them. Okay? The other part of the IMAGO is that we have what's called our lost self. So in my family, I had a family of 6. I had 2 brothers who died before I was born and 4 other brothers. So in my family, it was quite typical European, quite, what's the word? My father wasn't keen on women and chauvinist. So I learned to be very quiet and shy. I met Stan and he was very extroverted. So what I've learned from Stan is how to access my own extroversion. Does that make sense? So when we talk about our other half, yeah, often that's what it is, and that may be conscious or not. So we help to heal each other and complete each other. Yeah? Can you relate to that? Yeah? So that's what we look for in a partner, the positive and the negatives are stronger than the positives, okay? And we want to heal and we want to grow. Now, this is also good news, that there are stages in relationships, and these stages are normal Everybody goes through them and they repeat. Okay? The first stage is the romantic phase. Can you all relate to the romantic phase? The in love, where you feel fantastic, you know, you think that you've always known each other and, oh my God, I'd die without you, yeah? All those songs are about that phase, yeah? So the good news is, this is meant to happen. But the bad news is, it's meant to end. So what nature does, it brings us together with someone who at some level is incompatible. Now, this sound like nuts. Like if you knew what was down the track, you would run god awful in the opposite direction, yeah? You would. And that would be a mistake. So don't be fooled by your first impressions of someone. It may be the one. Just because some things turn you off. Hang around a bit longer, you just never know what might emerge. Okay? Just a thought. So the romantic phase is meant to end because the next phase is the power struggle. And what's the power struggle? The power struggle is when you start to have those illusions fade. When Stan's organisation, which I adored, was really pissing me off. Yeah? We went overseas for the first time. Because he'd travelled for 2 years, he had every day organised. Well, I don't do organisation like that, you know? So after a week or two, I rebelled. I said, I'm not doing this, okay? But then I thought, well, but I don't know where to go. I've got no idea, yeah? And then his mother started ringing him and saying, you've got to come home, there's problems at work. And I thought, what? And she said to him, yeah, you can leave Fran and the kids there. Well, I couldn't get on a plane unless I was severely medicated, you know. I had a serious fear of flying disease. I've recovered well, you know, just wave a ticket and I'm off. Well, except when it's bumpy, I'm not that good. So suddenly I wasn't his number one anymore. I thought, how can he leave me behind? So I got depressed. I went from excitement and joy with this wonderful organised man to, who is this? You tricked me, you betrayed me. How can you do this to me? Anyway, finally we compromised because I found a voice. I started to speak up. I wasn't kidding before when I said I used to be a good girl. That means compliant and boring. Yeah? But that's how I survived in my family. Okay? So I had a voice and I finally persuaded him to compromise. So instead of 9 weeks, we went for 6 weeks. Okay? So that's the power struggle. Now, the power struggle, it's horrendous. People come to us usually when they're stuck in the power struggle. They can't get out of it. They can't see anything positive in it. So we need to teach them that it's conflict, meaning growth, trying to happen. So I grew out of this. I learned to have a voice. I learned to assert myself. I actually learned to ask myself, what do I want? You know? Because Stan is quite a bit older than I am, I used to look up to him. Not in a good way. And not just because he was taller, you know. I still look up to him, but I just totally admire him. And not out of fantasy anymore, you know. At his age, he now has his 3rd career. I was telling Eloise the other day, at Stan's age, we're either dead or retired, which is, you know, 1 foot in the grave anyway. So, but, you know, he started off as a lawyer, and he was a fantastic lawyer. He got a bit cheesed off with that, and then used his skills to become a restaurateur. And then he left that and went into business with me. So he did some study, and now we work together. Okay? So there are many pluses between us, a few not so good things, but they've all helped us to grow. Okay? So what happens during the power struggle is almost like the stages of grief. Have you heard of the stages of grief? Of death and dying? Yeah? So first of all we have denial, anger, yeah? Depression, and then we come to a resolution. So I went through those stages on that overseas trip. Now, since then, Stan's taken me overseas about 40 times to make up. Okay, so the power struggle is also supposed to happen to bring up the unresolved issues. You with me on that? Yeah? And when we bring them up, we can heal them. We're going to give you a little demonstration of how we do that, okay? Because if issues don't come up, they're usually just buried, and people argue over the issues that aren't the issues. So any issue that's repeated means it's not resolved. Can you remember that? Repeated means unresolved, and issues will come up again and again and again. But once you have the mindset, so what do we need to learn here? What part of us is trying to grow? Then it's very different. And once you've healed something, it's done and dusted. Then something else comes up for healing, and that's how we grow and become moral. Okay. So what's the third stage? The third stage is called the conscious relationship, and that's really what we're aiming towards. To have you move from being unconscious, it doesn't mean you're a zombie, you know, but it does mean that a lot of our reactions are out of our awareness. Yeah? I'm sure a lot of you have heard about mindfulness. Yeah? It's about becoming mindful in a relationship. And again, there are processes in IMAGO that teach you how to do that. One of the key things that you learn is your partner is not you. Why is that important? It's important because we need two people to have a relationship. Yeah? If you always agree, you might as well relate to a mirror. Yeah, it's boring. I think it's boring. Yeah? So to have a different opinion is exciting. It can be annoying. It can be uncomfortable. But unless you have some difference in a relationship, you're not going to grow. Okay? So it's very, very important to remember that. In a conscious relationship, the focus shifts. It's not about what's in it for me, it's what's in it for us both. So the relationship takes over. Does that make sense? Yeah? You stop thinking about yourself and you think about what the other person needs. One of the key things that I need from Stan is empathy. Empathy doesn't just mean that he says, "Oh, I understand." To me, that's bullshit. You've got to tell me how you understand. And what is it that you understand? Yeah? And then I feel connected. Okay? So for Stan, empathy doesn't come naturally. He's got many wonderful qualities. That is not one of them. Whereas patience isn't one of mine, not with him. I can spend 10 years with my clients, but with Stan over empathy, I'm not very good. I'm still learning that one. Okay? So for Stan to learn to empathise helps him to bring out a part of himself that he has squashed down a long time ago because he probably didn't get empathy from his parents. Can you relate to that? Yeah? So by giving me what I need, it's not a compromise in a bad sense of the word. It's bringing forth a part of himself that he needs. So by giving me something that's vital to me that I'm missing in my family, he develops that part in himself. So he becomes more, not less. You know, we often say we shouldn't change our partner. That's a piece of crap. Sorry. I don't believe that. It's how you do it. If you call forth out of your heart and your spirit the best in your partner, how is that bad? Yeah? That's just my opinion. You know, you're free to take it or not take it. So we're in a relationship to grow. And that's why we need someone who's incompatible. Yeah? To rub us up the wrong way, not too much. It's all about balance. Yeah? And to bring out the parts of us that we need. Okay? When I did my first workshop, Stan did an amazing amount of work to help me. I'm a technical fuck-up, total. Okay? So he did the videos, everything to back me up. Anyway, we get to my first workshop and this all has to be videoed, sent overseas and assessed. You can't get the video machine to work. So I'm standing there, you know, there's a group of people and I'm thinking, how can I murder him? That's the truth. I was seriously thinking, I think strangulation's too good. No? I'll hang him up by the balls. Now, I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. And then I thought, you know what, I'm about to start a workshop on love and connection. I can't do this. This isn't going to go down too well. So I thought, I've got to change myself, you know. So I did some breathing and a bit of mindfulness and a few things. And then I calmed down. And then I started to think about Stan. I thought, my God, you know, get off yourself, Francesca, you mean bitch. You know, this isn't all about you, which it was for a few minutes. I said, what's it like for him? He's put in all this work, you know. His life shines up when I smile. It's true. All he wants is for me to be happy. And here I am ready to string him up by the balls because the video camera doesn't work. Not good, yeah? So as soon as I started thinking about him, I developed empathy, yeah? Which I'm telling him off for not having. Well, where was mine? Yeah? Developed empathy and I developed compassion. And all I wanted to do was to go over and hug him and kiss him, which I did. And I could feel his body go, oh, you know. He was just freaking out quietly. I'm so sorry. Anyway, somebody in the group said, oh, have you got trouble with your camera? Hang on, I'll fix it. And just flicked the switch and off it went.
Still got balls.
Sure has. And boy, has he got good ones. So, darling, can you come up and we'll do a demonstration? Not of what I do. No. They're all excited now, you know. This is hot monogamy demo. No. Okay. So just to sum up, we're going to do this experientially, right? So this is the romantic phase. Excuse us.
Oh, you're gorgeous.
Oh, you're divine.
I can't wait to hold you.
Oh. Okay, he's done. I've got to find a room, see you.
We can go upstairs.
So that's the romantic phase, yeah, and it's delightful, it's delicious, it's wonderful, and it ends. Now we'll show you the fridge episode and how it really happened.
This was about 30 odd years ago.
Okay. Okay, yes, you're right. That always works. You asshole!
What's wrong?
I opened the fridge and there's no fucking food in there.
There's loads of food in there.
You know what he thinks is food? Eggs, cheese, he's English. What do you expect?
Well, that's all the food. There's plenty of food to
That
eat.
is not food. I need meat. I need soup.
So why didn't you get some?
Well, you do the shopping.
Well, you didn't tell me you wanted it. How was I to know?
Well, if you loved me, you'd know.
Oh, crap.
Okay, can you relate to that? Yeah, I just...
Who said yes? Who said yes?
Well, you see, so that's not what we want to teach, yeah? So here's a conscious relationship, and this may seem really weird, and we'll tell you more about it, but this is the major piece of IMAGO. It's called the couple's dialogue, okay? Darling, I want to have a dialogue with you about how I behaved after the fridge episode. Is now a good time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. When I opened the fridge and saw there was no food in there, I really got upset.
So what I heard you say was that you really got upset when you opened the fridge and saw there was no food in there for you. Is that right?
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I realised down the track that what it reminded me of was when I nearly died of starvation, so I got really scared. And you know what happens to me when I'm scared.
So what I hear you say is that you got really scared because it reminded you of the time when you were a child and you nearly died of starvation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. You see how different this is? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we developed this more and more, and if we had more time, we'd go into it more. Do you want to hear more, or is that enough?
Yes, a bit more.
More? Okay. So what this reminds me of in childhood is my parents never listened to me. I never had what I needed, and I don't just mean food. They did their best, but, you know, they just weren't there for me.
So what I heard you say is that what it reminds you of, that it was in childhood, your parents rarely listened to you, and you often went without, and it makes you feel scared.
Very scared.
Very scared.
So what I do when I get scared is, instead of telling you that I'm scared, because it takes me a while to realise that I'm scared, what I do is I yell at you.
So when you get scared, because you don't make the connection straight away to realise that you're actually scared, you just react and yell at me.
Yes. And just as an aside, what happens during fights very often and during the power struggle is that ways that we handled issues in childhood return. This is an adult. Well, what I did before was an adult, you know? And children aren't going to relate like this. We have major defences in childhood, and it's fight, flight, or freeze. One of my major ones was to fight. So when I feel threatened, I come out and I fight, and I yell, okay? Stan's is he freezes. He doesn't say much. He did in that one because I've given him enough practice and developed that part in him so he can yell back. But he never did. If I was good, he was better. He was a perfect child, okay? So you learn through your fights to have a dialogue. Instead of continuing that horrible toxicity, you ask each other for a dialogue. And we teach couples the steps. We give them notes. So the first step is mirroring. So I'll say what I want. But when you mirror, there's no dumping, no shaming, no blaming, no criticism. There's strict rules, and you've got to keep to those. So being in control brings you into adult here and now space. Okay? If you say, oh, you asshole, he's not going to say, what I heard you say is I'm an asshole. That's not a good thing.
It doesn't work.
No, that is not a dialogue. You stop, you say, this is not a good time. Let's try again. Okay? So no shaming, no blaming, no sarcasm, no criticism. Is that clear? And if you take anything home from tonight, I'll say a little bit more about that. I'm coming up to the end now. It's zero negativity. Okay? I'll explain more about that. All right? So now, when you say, is there more, you keep going until there is no more. This can go for an hour. And you develop more and more about what's inside you. Okay? So when I'm finished, and let's say I am, then Stan will summarise. So the mirroring is almost word for word, but the summary is not. Obviously, you can't remember word for word everything that's said. Okay, so can you summarise?
So in summary, what I heard you say was that when you when you opened the fridge and you yelled at me, it reminded you of the time in childhood when you nearly died as a result of starvation.
Yes.
And it also reminded you of the situation with your parents when you never got what you really wanted. And so you didn't make the connection immediately because you just had a reaction, and so you yelled. Is that a reasonable summary?
That's a very good summary. So you see, he has to really listen to what I'm saying. Now, when he's really listening to what I'm saying, he's actually not listening to himself. Did you know that most of the time we don't speak to each other, we listen to ourselves? Can you relate to that? You know, you're ready for the next bit and, oh, you shit, how can you say that? Yeah? You have to put that aside. So again, what this teaches us, it almost becomes a meditation where you focus so much on what's being said that you, yes?
Can I just ask, is the solution filling the fridge, or is the solution him filling the fridge?
No.
Or the solution
no.
is
This is the
coming forth and saying, okay, I'll get healed out of my child?
That's a wonderful question. That's exactly right. This is the solution. If he fills up the fridge, what have I learnt?
Well, he's listening.
Well, he might be listening, but he's also terrified of me, right? And he'll get back at me in some passive-aggressive way, probably. And it will come out in some other guise, okay? So he may well fill the fridge, but we know enough now for him to say, look, I'll get you the fridge and can we dialogue this at another time because there's an issue here. Does that answer your question?
This could work with siblings as well.
Absolutely. Yes, a very good point. This works with all sorts of people, with children, with siblings, people at work. You don't have to mirror them exactly because they'll think you're nuts, but you just give them a sense, a paraphrase of what you've heard, because that brings about connection. And connection is what heals. We all want somebody there. And it's not about agreement. It's about understanding. It's about accuracy. You do not have to agree. Okay? So the healing comes from the connection. Okay? So when Stan's listening to me, he's forgetting that I was a bitch. Well, he's not forgetting, he's putting it on the side. Yeah? Okay, now there's 2 more steps. There's validation, which is not about agreement, and he'll show you what that is, and empathy. Okay?
So it makes sense to me, given your history, that you nearly died when you were a child and your parents didn't listen to you, that when you opened the fridge and found an absence of food, that it would scare you, and you react that way. And I imagine that you would have felt certainly more than frightened, you probably felt terrified, and you felt in fear of your life.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that you would react by yelling at me and be very angry and hurt.
It's okay. You see how powerful that is? Because most of us just really want to be heard and understood. Yeah? Now, sometimes a change is required, which is called a behaviour change request. So after you have mirroring, summarising, validation and empathy, yeah, we've created a sacred space within which I can ask for a change. So I might say, or Stan might say, oh, probably I would say, because it's my dialogue, I would say, in future when you go shopping, could you please remember meat and chicken soup? Yeah? But if I tell him that straight up, when the atmosphere's really tense, it might go over his head, or, yeah, he might fill the fridge, but not from his heart, because he doesn't get it. He's trying to do it to appease me, rather than from the higher part of the brain, yeah, which understands why he's doing it. Is that register? Can you resonate with that? So I know for me, as soon as I get empathy, whatever my issue is just melts away. Because he heals me, because I never got that. Okay? We all have different needs, you know? But basically, we want to be loved, and we feel loved by being understood, listened to, empathised and validated. Validation helps you realise you're not nuts. Okay? I might sound nuts, but if he gets it, that's fine. Sometimes my thinking is nutty. Just the way I think. Yeah?
Yeah.
But when he gets it, I feel really at one with him. Thank you. This is gorgeous. Mwah.
Love you.
Okay, so that's one process. It's one process that we use. Okay. A lot of what we do in IMAGO is also to help people to have a much more positive relationship. And how do we do that? Well, they make lists. There's a whole area called re-romanticising, because we also get couples who come along because their relationship's flat. You know, oh yeah, it's all right, you know, but whatever. Yeah? Because in the power struggle, people either fight or they just live a parallel, you know, I do my thing, he does yours, occasionally we meet, whatever, or people divorce. Okay? So the people who have a flat relationship, which is pretty common, just because you're in a relationship for a long time doesn't necessarily mean it's good. People can stay because they're afraid to leave, or they're afraid of loneliness. Yeah? And to understand what you need is deeply, deeply important. So you learn to know that and to express it. Thank you. He's amazing. And I'm not just saying that because I've got an audience. So we focus on the positive, we re-romanticise. The theory of that is, if you do what you did before, you'll get what you had before. That's not rocket science, is it? So what did you do in the romantic phase? Yeah? You know, you dressed up, you looked good, you couldn't wait for the phone to ring. Down the track you think, oh, one, I'm busy. Oh, I got to change a nappy, you know. Yeah, I'm going to go out. Yeah, don't call me. All too common. Okay, so we teach people to make a list of all what made you feel loved and cared for. And then the partner gets that list and starts to redo that, and vice versa. Does that sound like a good idea? Yeah? Take me out, you used to. Why don't we sit and watch the bloody... Well, not footy, I love it. It's a bit of a role reversal in our house. But, you know, I mean, we do things. We love to dance, we go out, we travel. Our kids are still asking us when are we going to settle down. So what? What's that? You know? Have fun. So we make lists, you know. What's a fun thing for you? Lists of surprises. If you've been around together for a while and you haven't done that, I urge you to. You'd be surprised what a change it makes. Remember, if you do what you did before, that's positive, you'll get what you had before. If you do what you did before that's negative, you're going to have a negative result. So we try and shift the negative, use it for learning, into the positive, to move forward, have fun. Joyful aliveness is all our birthright, is it not? Okay? So the three main things we need in a relationship. It's one core idea. Remember that. I'm going to cheat. 4. One core idea, which is the purpose of a committed relationship is to grow up. To grow up means that we resolve what we need to resolve. Okay? Now, if you're single and you understand what's attracted you in the past, that may help you to pick a better relationship in the future. Yeah? I hope that's been of help. One core skill. The skill is the dialogue, and there are many versions of the dialogue, like an appreciation dialogue. Yeah? I'll just quickly... What's one thing I appreciate about you, darling, is that you're so loving in an unconditional way.
So what I heard you say is that one thing you appreciate about me is that I'm so loving in an unconditional way.
Okay, you give me one?
Yeah.
2? Greedy guts.
One thing I appreciate about you is that you're such an inventive cook.
I'm a lousy cook, so I've got to do things to rescue them. Thank you. Now, you see, I did the wrong thing then. Okay. One thing you appreciate about me is that I'm an inventive cook. See what I did? I fell out of the dialogue and went straight into a defence. It's not the right way to go. See, I screw up too. After all these years, I don't always get it right. But I notice. I come back and back into the dialogue. So give appreciations to anybody. It's a wonderful thing to do. Okay? The next thing is one core decision. And I want you to take this home. 0 negativity. If you remember nothing of what I've said, except remember his balls. I can't get my mind off it at the moment. Okay. 0 negativity. What is that? It means the obvious, that you don't shame, blame, criticise or have sarcasm on a serious note. You say nothing that makes your partner or your friend wrong, or your child or your workmate. Don't demean them in any way. Yeah? With 0 negativity, every relationship you have will transform. Every relationship you have will transform. So if you could start practicing that even just tonight. 0 negativity, daily appreciations, you know. I mean, we're still very much in love, and that's wonderful. But the times when the love isn't there, when there are difficult things to do, we have to remember to stay in control and say the things that matter. Have a dialogue if nothing else works, because the dialogue always works. Always. I know it's not natural. What's natural is to fight. Well, does that work? Not really.
You've got to have 2 people willing to have the dialogue.
Correct.
That's, you know, if one person's kind of there with, you know, wanting to be adult, and the other person's not, then that's really tricky.
It's very tricky. However, you're either in a committed relationship or you're not. And if you're in a committed relationship and you want to be conscious and grow, then you commit to dialoguing. Okay? If you're not willing to dialogue, the relationship's probably cactus. Because there's nowhere to go. You can't dialogue on your own, you know. What you can say is, I don't want to dialogue now, so when is a good time? and you need to give one within 24 hours. Okay.
But you can dialogue with more than one person, right?
No, one at a time. Is that answering your question?
Monogamy.
Dialogue with anyone, but one at a time.
Just to say, yes, what's the importance of the dialogue like for me? Just when you did the last example, it seemed as though you didn't hear. Like, I don't know what is the exact importance of it. Like, if you can understand me, so why do you need to repeat it back? I don't understand.
It's because particularly when there's a hot issue, if somebody's repeating back to you what you've said, try it. It's quite profound. Sometimes you think, oh my God, did I really say that? Or you get a deep sense of being heard. That in itself is therapeutic.
So if I said to Julia, I really loved your food tonight, it was fantastic, and he said the same thing back to me, I think that's a bit weird.
Yeah, well... No. Look, it's mainly for conflict, okay? And quite often at the start of a dialogue, you can start off with appreciations, right? Just to soften the atmosphere. No, I mean, fair enough. You don't walk around to people and expect to mirror them all the time. No. I get that.
Fran is saying dialogue, but you don't just launch into repeating them.
No, it's almost always, for a major issue, so that you keep the boundaries and you keep it safe. Because if you don't have safety in a relationship, you don't show up fully, okay? The old patterns of defence come forth. Thank you for asking that question, because it's an important point I almost didn't say. Safety is numero uno. Without safety, you don't get connection. Without connection, you don't have passion. And passion is a full aliveness. It's not just sexual. But thank God it is. It's not just sexual. Yes.
But also in the case of appreciations, it's obviously useful to reflect those back or to mirror it back, because there are times when, like with you, the defence has got in the way, so you may not have received the appreciation. And I know I've been in that instance of not receiving appreciations because even though the other person might have been saying it, I wasn't open to hearing it. And
Well
so when I'm saying, oh, you don't appreciate me, and then it's reflected back, I've said this, and this, and I didn't hear any of those things.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I showed you quite spontaneously. I didn't mean that to happen. It just came out, of course I have to rescue them, blah, blah, blah. That was my defence, And often we do have difficulty taking in an appreciation. We're taught it's not okay, your head will swell and fuck up advice like that. Yeah, thanks for that. Any more questions?
Yeah. What do you do if yourself or someone else is in the yelling phase? What do you do when you go, like someone's yelling at you or telling you what they don't like about you, or they don't want it, or if they're in that angry phase? Right. What do you do?
That's a good question. What do you do when someone's yelling and angry at you? Well, you've got a number of options. You can yell back. I don't recommend that. You can leave the room. That can be a good strategy. Or you can say, listen, assuming that you've both been to therapy and you've learned how to dialogue, you say, listen, we need to have a dialogue. This is not a good time. When is a good time? And then leave the room. When you have an understanding, an agreement of when that will be. Right? Dialogue works, guys. Really, it does. We know, we've done it with hundreds of couples. They can resolve almost anything. Right? The point is you make an invitation to dialogue. So when the atmosphere is really hot, isn't always the best time. But it's also calming that you know you have an appointment for one. And the appointment needs to be very soon. Usually a total maximum of 24 hours. Anything beyond 12 is difficult. And that in agreement is holy. If you say you're going to do it at 2 o'clock, keep it. Because if you don't, you're wrecking the reliability and trust. Okay? So it's teaching us to grow up and be adult. Yelling is not advisable. Even though I do it sometimes, I'll be honest, it doesn't get me anywhere, except a sore throat.
I might ask you privately, actually.
Openly, come on.
suffered extreme childhood abuse, so they've grown up, you know, seeing their parents abusing each other and their children, and how obviously people that go through that are attracted to people who are also abused and bring out those childhood traumas.
So how do I deal with those people if they're in a couple? We use the dialogue, and it's a particular dialogue called the parent-child dialogue, where it's like a role play and you go back through not just what happened, but it's more about the feelings, right? And the other partner will play the role of a parent, if it was a parent. And what you have, because the unconscious mind cannot tell the difference between then and now, it's actually very healing to have somebody play. I mean, it takes a little while to get into this. To have somebody play in the now a parental role quietens the unconscious mind. Sometimes we need to do this a few times, and you say, what's it like living with me? What did I need from you? What did I miss out on? And it's very emotional. And then the other person playing the parent will just repeat all that. So what I did to you was, how you felt about that was. Can you imagine how profound that is? To have that reflected back is incredibly validating, because most abused children could not speak. So just the I'm getting shivers. Just the dialogue itself, to be able to say that, to witness by myself and Stan and a partner, is incredible. And to have the words reflected back to you and then empathised with, validated, is incredible. I've worked with people for years in abuse, and yet I found half a dozen sessions like that does much more. So thank you for asking me that. It's a really profound experience. Very rarely, if there's any psychosis, I'll see one of them alone, but that's rare. Usually it's adequate between the two of them. Yeah? Does that answer your question? Yeah, it's an incredible privilege to be part of that. And of course, first I have to build safety so that the abused person doesn't feel I'm invading boundaries. So it takes not a long time, probably 3 or 4 sessions where we get a history and build up a sense of what's required. I can usually tell when someone's abused because they're pretty defensive and they don't do intimacy well. Either that or they're super intimate. They're blurring boundaries. It's like they get him first. So I understand that with heart and compassion, and I try and work very much to keep them safe.
Yes. Have you ever found it different with single parents, separated parents, and parents who are together in relationships?
I'm not sure.
So in relationships, likewise, have you ever seen the difference between parents who are separated and parents who are together?
You mean for the product of separated
If their parents have come from a broken home or not?
You mean the people who come to therapy is a different from their parents? Absolutely.
What's the change over there?
The difference depends on how the separation occurred, what age the children were, and the regularity or lack of with which they saw both separated parties. Yeah, and if the parents use the children, which they can do, and used can be in all sorts of ways as a confidant, inappropriate, then they are quite fucked up.
So does an individual just pick up and go with it, or do you think that there's always consequences from our parents?
No, lots of parents do a super job. They do. We're not into parent bashing, not at all. Even parents who abuse have a heart somewhere, and they probably were abused. So we move towards forgiveness and letting all that negativity go. We don't condone what was done, obviously, but acceptance and forgiveness is really, really important. Yeah? Question over here?
I was just going to say that it seems that the prerequisite is actually a high level of self-awareness for both individuals as well to be able to use these.
It's helpful. a high level of awareness is helpful, but if you don't have it, you soon develop it, because the processes are designed to make you conscious. And there are questions like, what does this remind me of in childhood? If you've never thought about it, it's on the sheet that we give out. Okay, well, not everybody is self-reflective, and that's fine, you know. But that is important, yes, but it's not necessarily initially a prerequisite, but it is something that's taught. It's part of what we call psychoeducation, and it's part of growing up. Yeah?
So when you talk about dialogue,
Yes.
I understood that. Is that the key to, is that what it boils down to, the key to monogamy? Is it the dialogue? Because I understood maybe the key was, it's not what you say, the content so much, it's just how you, it's everything else.
Well, what you say is very important.
How important is that?
It's extremely important. Harville would say that the dialogue is the most important piece in the IMAGO therapy. Right?
But that differs from conventional.
It differs, yes it does, and it's effective. That's why I keep using it. I hated it at first. Stan used to chase me around the house to dialogue, and I'd say, what? What do you mean? Me dialogue?
Sure it was to dialogue?
Well, no. No, I'm a therapist. I know what you're on about, and I do know what he's on about. But he needed to explore it and so on and so forth. Yeah? All right, one more. Yes.
So with a, say a key trigger, for instance, so like because my dad was a middle class banker, very controlling. So I grew up being told what to do.
Right.
So I still struggle with, you know, people with bosses, individuals. You know, I get my back up. It's a bit like, you know, Pekka says, take the bin out. Or you know, you take the bin out or something. Please sometimes. But, you know, that's a simple one, but it can be as simple as that. Whereas I go back to, like, as a kid, I think, well, fuck you, take the bin out yourself. Or my bosses and things over the years, it's just a difficult one. So with that dialogue, right?
There's people you want me to take the bin out.
Whatever you
So you're saying fuck you then?
I'm talking about there's a core wounding or trigger there. So with the IMAGO, when you're dealing with it with dialogue,
Yes.
how long do you think is the
Before you take the bin out.
I understand what
Once a week.
Okay.
an easy one?
It's not an easy one. It's actually a really good question, because it's very rare that what people argue about is actually the issue. And that's exactly what you're saying. And I like to think that Stan and I are skilled enough that we'll guide people fairly quickly into what's really going on underneath. So what does this mean to you? Why do you need him to take the bin out? Can you explore that? What is it like for you feeling that you're being told to do something? And then you'll both dialogue those sides of it, and you get a lot of learning from that. Yeah?
I just put the bin out on Sunday, whether it's fucking empty.
But that's not going to heal you. Okay, look, thank you. Yeah, but you've got the guts of it. Unless you get to the core, you're going to argue about something else. All right, so it's not just about the bin. Correct. Yes, yes.
Authority figures, like I don't know who released pointing out either.
Right, yeah. So authority figures will represent your primary caretakers, right? I mean, I can do a whole lecture on the unconscious mind. I won't do that tonight, another time. If you'd like us to come back, we can do another one. It's just fascinating, all the stuff that comes up. I mean, I am so lucky. I absolutely love and adore what I do. You know, I work longer than anybody I know, and I don't say harder. I get energised at work. I really do. I'm just totally privileged, and to see people transform in front of me is just a blessing. They do the work, you know. I'm like a midwife. I just guide it a little, you know. They go through the agony and the pain, but it's so worth it. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you
And
so
thank you
much,
all for
Fran.
your questions and your attention.
Thank you, Lily. That was amazing.